Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be dissertating and talking about Saturn transiting the third house in a natal chart. Now, on average, Saturn will traverse a house for approximately 2.5 years. If your house size is a little bit larger than average, then Saturn will be in there for a little bit of a longer duration. If your house size is a little bit smaller than average, then Saturn will be in there for a little bit of a smaller duration. Well, anyway, people, first thing I'll look at when Saturn transits your natal third house, this could be a time where your communications can be very serious. You don't really have the need in many instances for superficial conversation. Saturn could be about restructuring, so it could be a time where maybe things, people even that you've communicated with, maybe you might diminish them. Those communications might be diminished to some degree if they were with people where you only talked about things that were really that you didn't feel were that significant. Those communications may diminish. Now, or as far as communications with those people, I should say. Now, nothing really frivolous is really in your mindset during this time. This could be about conversation of serious matters. This could be a time. Also, Saturn is, of course, connected with restriction and limitation. You might find that some of your communications might be dissipating a little bit, and it could also be a time where you look at the third house. Third house is associated with siblings. And this could be a time because Saturn is about responsibility. You might feel where you might have more responsibilities connected with brothers and sisters if you do have any. It could range there could be a wide divergence of reasons for this. You could be running errands for them, or maybe they need some work done and they need your help and collaborating with them on some project. In some instances, though maybe the minuscule as they may be, it could be that you may have a brother or sister maybe is debilitated, or somebody is in a situation where they're not able to do a lot for themselves during this time. Maybe it's just someone, for example, has some minor injury, but it prevents them from getting around in the manner in which they were accustomed to, and you got to go help them out and do some things for them. As I'm just saying, as an isolated example. This could also be a time where you might feel a little bit more, it might be a little bit more despondent than usual, a little bit more melancholy. Your nature, it could be such where, as far as your conversations, they could be a lot more serious during this time than usual. And the thing, too, is when you look at Saturn traversing your natal third house, this could be a time to, you look at the third house as connected with short journeys. So there might be some kind of limitation or restriction connected with this, or you might experience more restrictions and limitations than usual. Whether it's something, a lot of cases, I think, or at least some cases, I should say, it could be a vehicle. Maybe that requires more repair work. I mean, third house is connected with local transportation. So if you have a vehicle, maybe it needs more work than usual and it might cause some delays in your short journeys. This could be also a time where you might decide to pick up some subject and become learned in it, in as far as serious learning and serious assimilation of knowledge. If the few people out there that are watching this that may still be in high school or some kind of junior high school, and you might be putting more serious effort and more responsibility into school and in terms of learning your subjects. That this could be a time where you look at what Saturn can do. Saturn can restructure. Saturn can take out really what's not always important, and makes you focus and puts some concentration of energy into the things that are important. This could be a time for serious formulation of ideas. And when you look at the Saturn transiting the third house too, this could be also a time when we look at this, and Saturn can restrict, it can limit to some degree, but it could also give you, as I stated before, it could also, well, as I've said about Saturn before, Saturn can be about discipline and could give you more disciplined thinking during this transit. You could be more assiduous, more prudent regarding what you say. You may take your time to respond to things. It might be a time where also that your communications might be delayed if you have, like, say, emails, you're sending messages to somebody, making phone calls. You might not get them returned as quickly as usual than you ordinarily do during this period. So those are some things to look at as far as this time goes. And there also might be a little bit more propensity toward worrying during this period than usual. So anyway, and also it could indicate too that you might not always be able to articulate what you wanted, and compared to what you were able to do, you might be able to articulate things at a little bit less than you did on average before this transit. But during this transit, you might figure out maybe some improvements and modifications that you may make to your way of communication. And that may start near the beginning of this transit, and then when it culminates and reaches the end of the third house is when you figure out what you need to do and make those improvements perhaps. So anyway, also it's important to look at the aspects that are made to your natal planets and points by this transit, as this could impact the transit. Now let's say, for example, that transiting Saturn in your natal third house is making a square in conjunct or opposition to your natal Neptune. This could indicate perhaps distorted or imagined fears, which may cause some delays. Now, being in the third house, it could be tied into communication and short journeys. Now let's take another example. Let's say that transiting Saturn in your natal third house is making a conjunction to your natal Pluto. This could be a time where you may experience some restrictions and limitations connected with power, control, even making a big change or transformation. Being in the third, this may be tied in to siblings and perhaps even neighbors. Now also another interpretation can make as far as transiting Saturn, transiting Saturn in the third house, making a conjunction to your natal Pluto. It could indicate that responsibility, which is Saturn, and perhaps to crime, which is Pluto, could be connected to your neighborhood, which would be the third house. So this might be a time where you might get more involved as far as maybe neighborhood watch community. I know this could be isolated, but I think it could increase that possibility and propensity for that during, as far as this transit goes. Now, anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for Saturn transiting the third house in a natal chart. And stay tuned next time, where I will be dissertating and talking about Saturn transiting the fourth house in a natal chart. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.